Around the NFL podcast. Wishes it were the Split Ends podcast.
That's
Feels
putting me in a
strong.
weird spot.
Feels like a reach. Welcome to another edition of the Around the NFL podcast. I'm Dan Hanzus. I come to you from a virtual room filled with some heroes. Marc Sessler, Gregg Rosenthal. And yes, you just heard her voice sheepishly trying to duck out of the money tag. It's the great Colleen, Wolfe, Connie Fox, the tiny box. She's back.
Yo, great to see you guys. Tugboat, how you doing? Did you get a sound drop yet for the boat?
Do we have the drop, Ricky? Maybe we'll edit in post. You put her on a spot there. Considering she is your co-host on the Split Ends podcast, to put her on the spot and make her producing seem subpar. Interesting play there. I like it.
I'm just pushing her to get better, to be better. We should all push ourselves to be better.
That's a good friend. It's a good quality in a friend,
Right?
and that's the kind of friend that you seem to appear to be.
Since we haven't had you, Connie, on the show in a few weeks, I want to give you the opportunity to share your feelings about the legendary quarterback Tom Brady on the eve of his possible retirement.
Oh,
I love Tom Brady.
Love you, bro.
Wait, what was that?
Love you, Tom. I love Tom Brady.
Love you, bro.
Do you love Tom Brady? Share it. Spill it.
I love the way that he plays, but, it wouldn't be
you?
the worst thing in the world if he decided to hang it up and spend some time with his family and his production company, whatever he has going on. I mean, I don't know. I honestly, if I'm being completely serious, I think that we're going to look back at this era of football and Tom Brady and be like, oh my God, I can't believe we covered him at the height of his powers. And he's been so good and such a staple, and taking him for granted is a really easy thing to do. But also it's Tom Brady, and it's also very easy to hate on him because he's so good and because no one else has ever reached what he's been able to do. So I don't know.
Well, you know who doesn't
Does that
take
answer
him
your
for
question?
granted?
You gave me a surprisingly serious answer.
Right, a guy by the name of Bill Cowher.
Love you,
Bill
Tom.
Cowher appreciates every moment.
Love you, bro.
And I think you should be a little more concerned with Bill Cowher's emotions if Tom Brady does retire. That's who I'm worried about.
It's
if Bill's
typically
gonna be okay.
Yeah, it's more like middle-aged white men in football media or retired coaches that seem to truly fall for Tom in a perhaps romantic way. And maybe Tom, if he does retire, maybe he goes and takes some time out and moves from Tampa to
Miami.
maybe.
I understand where you were going with this. You want to tee me up one more time?
Yeah. What do you think about Tom Brady? Do you want to share any feelings about the man the way others have?
I love you, Tom. That's what you were looking for, right?
We're going to get to Tom Brady and what's going on with Brady. It's the start of a saga that I still believe in my heart is going to stretch over not days or weeks, but years. This is step one.
Whoa.
Longtime player begins to mull retirement. It becomes a story every winter for about 2 to 3 years, then becomes a reality. Could be wrong, though. This could be it for Tom Brady. We shall see. But today's show is a good one because we're going to get to Jourdan Rodrigue of The Athletic, who covers the Rams and is going to give us a bit of a deep dive on where the Rams are at, both in terms of their journey and where they're at mentally. It's a very interesting team when you start kind of peeling back the layers of the players that are at the center of this, the coaching staff. Obviously, the coaching staff has some major demons to slay here with Kyle Shanahan and his 6-game winning streak. Gregg, I feel like if Kyle Shanahan defeats Sean McVay for a 7th consecutive time for the NFC Championship, that is the type of bragging rights that no boy genius comes back from. I don't think McVay survives it emotionally. There's a lot on the line there.
Well, their friendship certainly doesn't. If they are even still
That's
friends,
over.
I feel like nothing rang as false as Kyle Shanahan trying to say that him and Matt LaFleur are still friends too after he tried to go get Aaron Rodgers last offseason. There's no greater revenge though than Kyle Shanahan just destroying assistant after assistant of his old state. It's like, I made you and I'm still better than you.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll get into the Rams with Jourdan. We're going to hit a bunch of news. But before we get into any of the other Brady stuff or anything else going on in the league, we got to talk about the huge story that broke on Tuesday. Sean Payton and the Saints are no more. Let's get into the news.
Hey, Coach. Mr. Goodall is on the phone?
Roger Goodell's on the phone. The commissioner.
He didn't say what his job was.
Stunning news? Perhaps not stunning, because there were some breadcrumbs along the way over the last several days. But Sean Payton's storied run with the Saints is over. Rap Sheet originally reported it on Tuesday that Payton was stepping down as head coach of the Saints. 58 years old, leaves the team 60-plus games over 500, 9 postseason wins, a Coach of the Year award, a Super Bowl title, and now he is stepping away. He had a press conference on Tuesday explaining where he's at headspace-wise as everyone speculates what happens next.
I still have a vision for doing things in football, and I'll be honest with you, that might be coaching again at some point. I don't think it's this year. I think maybe in the future, but that's not where my heart is right now. It's not at all.
Payton also addressed some of the speculation, rampant speculation, that he might get into the media. Let's hear that as well.
I don't know what's next. I've not spoken to anyone from a media outlet relative to doing television or radio. Maybe that opportunity arises. I think I'd like to do that. I think I'd be pretty good at it.
All right, so Connie, let's start the conversation this way. As I saw this unfold this morning, I couldn't stop thinking what a brilliant personal maneuver this is for Sean Payton, because I do buy the idea that after a very tough season, and he's been doing the job forever, maybe this was his time. He's seen the coaches he's looked up to, a Parcells for instance, who stepped back for a year or two and then got back in. He gets to now get out, take whatever job he wants in the football sphere, or do nothing. And then when he does decide to get back in, he will become the hottest head coach property in the NFL in some time. It feels like it sets up well, but we don't even know if he's coming back. Your thoughts on all this news?
What a life, what an option to have in life, to be Sean Payton in this very position. He was in Cabo, went radio silent on a bunch of people, and then decided, you know what, I'm going to step away from this organization that I've been linked to and loved by the fans for so long, because he can basically take an NFL sabbatical. Like Bruce Arians has done it too in the past. And we've seen coaches do this. And I wonder if it's just because, maybe he's reached that burnout phase. We saw what happened this year when he didn't have a Hall of Fame quarterback, went through 4 different quarterbacks. I think that being a head coach in the NFL is stressful in and of itself, just in a regular year. And then you add in all of the layers with COVID. And then they had the hurricane that misplaced them at the beginning of the year too. So there were just so many things that added probably to the stress and anxiety of the job. And so for him to be able to have this as an option is great for him. And I thought the press conference in general, he was so thoughtful. He was so sincere and so genuine. And it was kind of surreal to watch him say goodbye and watch him step aside. And I did love the fact that there were so many stories that he told and thanked so many people. And you could tell that he really did think about this ahead of time. He even said that he Googled at one point how to not cry during a speech, and that the Google machine told him to drink water. And I was wondering—
He Googled that?
Yeah. And I was wondering at one point why he was just furiously slamming bottles of water back during this press conference. He would stop and just all of a sudden start chugging water. And so that made a whole lot of sense. But I just thought that, his empathy towards the media and covering the NFL during this time with all of the protocols. And he came off as the person that I really wanted him to be in this situation.
Yeah, I want to get to his future next, but quickly, it is a day for him to reflect. The press conference is still going on as we talk. It actually might still be going on by the time you hear this. It could just continue, but he's got a lot to talk about. This 16-year run ranks with the great coaching runs. I mean, he's not Lombardi or Belichick, but I think he's a Hall of Fame coach. And I think the place where he took over this franchise to where they went immediately, that 06 team is, one of the most magical non-Super Bowl teams to me ever. Reggie Bush, who we mentioned a couple times, really changed that franchise. It's hard to remember what a big deal getting Reggie Bush was, just in terms of putting them on the front page of the newspaper, selling tickets, all this stuff. And it's been an incredible journey. But he said going into this year, he was thinking about it, going into training camp, that this might be his last year. And I think he did a great job. He showed his value this year. Their offense, quietly, if you kind of look at the analytics behind it, was pretty decent considering the disastrous quarterback and injury situation that he had. He joked how he tried to get Drew Brees to play again this year, and after watching the Dolphins game, they talked again, and they were happy that Drew didn't come back, because that would have not been fun for Drew Brees to be behind. So I think you said it well, Dan. He's 58 years old, which I guess is getting up there in life terms, but in NFL coaching terms, it's still pretty young. I mean, he's
Belichick is 70.
Right, he's 10 years younger.
Arians is 70.
And he's going to be in a position in 1 year. And once they asked, once he allowed questions and they got a little more specific about it, he made it pretty clear this year's off for coaching. He wants to do media. And then it sounds like he'll be throwing his hat back into the coaching ring. And you would think at that time, the Saints actually might try to get him to coach for them again, because they have his contract, and that's where it gets interesting. They can get compensation for him. But he mentioned how, Gayle Benson, and I'd be worried as a Saints fan, considering the history of this ownership when Sean Payton hasn't been there, about what's going to happen next. And Gayle Benson said, how about you just come back and camp? You can have the whole off season off and come back and camp and coach us. So it's whenever he wants to come back, if it's a year or 2 years, the first thing they'll do is just probably try to get that. So, if anything, they might just try to keep the seat warm with Dennis Allen and then replace him.
They've already had one bad decision, and it hasn't even happened yet, telling the head coach he could take the summer off. Right. What do you got to say on this, Mark?
Right.
What I found the most delicious about this, as it was sort of unfolding on Twitter, and I agree that I don't think it was shocking, because there were more and more sort of becoming more trenchant concerns and reports about the fact that this isn't just him with his phone off on vacation. This is him genuinely considering his future. But what I loved was the fact that, it reminded me when I was in sixth grade in middle school, there was this power couple, if you can be powerful at that age.
Sixth grade?
In sixth grade, Terry
you
Hall.
You could be powerful in sixth grade.
Right, Terry Hall and Jen Varilla. They were both essentially the hottest guy and the hottest girl dating, and they had a stunning breakup in about April or May, just as the spring was starting.
Woo!
And couples all over the school, girls all over the school, were dumping the lower level guys that they were with, and the same was happening in reverse, because there was just a chance that maybe you'd have a chance to get with Terry Hall or Jen Varilla. And every single fan base was thinking, yeah, our coach is okay, but if we can get this guy, F our coach. And it's all centered around Mike McCarthy, because there's been rumors forever that the Cowboys obviously love Sean Payton. I'll never forget in 2019 sitting at the owners meetings at the Saints table waiting for Payton, and he rolled up with a little leather briefcase saying, "This is my new contract in here, my 5-year deal." And who knew it would lead to this at this point? I mean, I think it's an incredible move for coaches in general to take a little bit of time in between job A and job B. He can explore, like you said, Dan. Bill Parcells went to NBC for a year, did not thrive at that at all. He just was not good for that. So who knows if Sean Payton would, he talked about TV, get linked into that and love it. But I am telling you, almost outside of Belichick, every coach in the league would be replaced in a second by ownership for Sean Payton.
It's going to be a story all year. It's going to be a story all year, assuming he's gone.
This season alone shows how valuable he was.
Every coach, I think, is strong personally, but I would say 75% of the league would be willing to do a swap out at the very least. And you brought up McCarthy. That, to me, it all is still, if you put the red string on the board, today was a bad day for Mike McCarthy, because what this is going to be now is a situation where he's going to, when we do our hot butt exercise come August,
my favorite,
his butt is going to be hotter than anyone, because it's all set up for, hey, Mike, if you don't win the Super Bowl, Jerry Jones is going to find a way to cut a check and get Payton separated from the Saints and bring him in to replace you to be the missing link of this team. That all now, sometimes these things that seem obvious don't actually come to fruition, but sometimes it's right in front of you, and I feel like this is one of those times where Payton will be the next coach of the Dallas Cowboys. It just now comes down to, can Mike McCarthy, with the urgency at the highest, will that team to another level? That still seems to me where his next location is. I don't buy the Saints. I think that's the end of an era. The way he was talking sounded like it was the end of the era, and maybe the Saints would be better to turn the page themselves.
I get it, but they can hold they have him under contract. I don't know. I mean, if you're the
contracts
Saints,
mean nothing. They always get torn up.
I get it, but if you're gonna trade him and you're gonna trade him to the Dallas Cowboys, your price is going to be so high that either it's going to work out great for you or the Cowboys aren't going to be able to do it. I mean, he becomes like a player almost that you're going to want to send to a different contrast, or certainly not a regional rival relatively in the Cowboys. And it becomes a very fascinating John Gruden-like situation, except I think with a little more year-to-year pressure on it than Gruden had, where you always thought Gruden was going to come back. You didn't know when. Payton, if he's going to do it, maybe he'll just love broadcasting, but if he's going to do it, it's going to be sooner than later. And the Saints absolutely should hold a hard bargain. Like, this is nice. They're like passing pastries back and forth, but at some point it's going to be business.
I thought it was interesting that Sean Payton brought up Mike McCarthy by name in this press conference, talking about when he found out that Mike McCarthy got the Packers job and he threw his phone into the pillow, and obviously it was the best thing that ever happened to him. So I appreciated that. I thought that was kind of a little of a breadcrumb maybe, but I also loved his honesty when he was talking about his friendship with Mickey Loomis, and then just threw out of nowhere. He was like, he walks slow. It bothers me. I want him to pick it up. That was maybe my favorite line of the entire press conference.
Yeah, that struck me too, Connie, because it did feel like he was going very much off the top of his head, and he was speaking comfortably, which is a good sign for a guy that's looking to get in the media. He won't be like his old quarterback, Drew Brees. Greg, let me just say this, to go back to the McCarthy thing. I understand what the cost would be, and it would be deemed by many to be prohibitive. I understand it could be messy with the contract situation. Maybe the Saints don't want to keep him in the NFC. But you're telling me, not if, when the Cowboys go 8-9 next year under Mike McCarthy, and Jera, who's at that point going to be nearing 80 years old, I believe, is going to move mountains to get the head coach he wants, just like he did to get Bill Parcells way back when. That I just stand by that. I think that Jera will make it happen if Jera wants it to happen.
Okay, but then then the Saints wind up with like 3 first-round picks or whatever it's going to take, and I just think it'll be a fascinating thing because it's so rare, and maybe other teams get involved, that the Saints would rather trade him to, and if that's where Payton wants to go and the Cowboys want it to happen, that's all possible. But the Saints are in a good point. Like, that's what they're paying for with that suitcase, Mark. Like, right. That's what they were paying for. Is now they're going to pay him all that money. They have that leverage, and they gave him that guaranteed money. They gave him the raise, and even at the time, Payton probably knew he's giving up some power if he wants to walk away, and that's part of it. And I think like the next team that gets Sean Payton, it's like they are getting such a good coach. I liked what he said about his maturation process of how to deal with the media and him as a person. If you look at the coaches that's been under him, he's chosen some great coaches. Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn, who are now in Detroit. He really made a push for Dennis Allen. I think he knows how to handle the whole organization, and I think that's different. Like when he won early in New Orleans, he's admitted he had some trouble almost dealing with like the rock star nature that he had in New Orleans. He admittedly had a drug problem. You had Bountygate, and there was probably no more paranoid coach in the entire NFL. There was a point around the Bountygate and when all that drug stuff was happening that he didn't seem like a healthy person, and now I think he's come out the other end and he's been a better coach. And they haven't won the Super Bowl here in the last stretch, but they've been incredibly well coached and consistent, and you're right that any team is going to want him.
Well, he's definitely mellowed out. I mean, people that know him talked about that. I mean, he's on his second marriage at this point. His life's changed. I would say this to Dan's point: 3 first-round picks for Sean Payton. If I'm an NFL owner, I do it. I never look back. I never think about it.
Okay.
You're good for the next 10 years, and you've got a brand, you've got a franchise, and you have a coach that can maximize your players your scheme, your
Just pair him with
offense
a
as good as
quarterback.
anyone in the league. Sure. But even
Meanwhile,
with lesser quarterbacks, look what he's done.
The last thing is he's like Parcells, though. He's leaving at the right time. Like, you want to go in and rebuild it and be the hero, and they've got about $70 million in cap problems. They don't have a quarterback. I don't think Terran Armstead's going to be there. There's going to be a lot of changes, and Mickey Loomis, who's been there the whole time, and maybe Dennis Allen, who it really sounds like has the inside track for this job, is going to have an extremely difficult job in this next year.
Well, and to Connie's point, I guess, Mickey Loomis walking at a slower pace has finally annoyed him to such a degree that he's left Mickey Loomis,
Right.
general manager of the New Orleans Pelicans as well, in a double fix.
Peyton's just going to go hang out in Cabo. Like, he just got married in Cabo this offseason. He went
What
and
is
made his
going on in
decision in
Cabo?
Cabo. I don't know. Great things happen
He
in
said
Cabo.
he just bought a new place in New Orleans, so I like that. He's staying.
Well, he probably has multiple.
Staying
You know,
there,
multiple
I think we should go to Cabo. I feel like
Done.
anybody who goes to
Yeah.
Cabo, something good happens. I got
Had
my
my
anniversary
honeymoon in
coming
Cabo.
up. There you go. By the way, we also one thing you didn't address, Gregg, with his personal problems and tragedies, the Kevin James casting. Like, he overcame that.
Well,
you
that's
could have
great
a-
news.
have a
He's
sequel
gonna
to
get
that
to
film
do
now.
he's gonna be working for, I'm gonna predict NBC, but could be ESPN, who knows? And he's gonna be able to do all the talk shows promoting home game. People made fun of the Kevin James thing. Are you kidding me? Like, he's a football coach that has some pretty high A-list level actor playing him, a Netflix movie. I mean, that should be good for the ego.
Yeah, I think the casting could have been a little better on that. That's all.
Do you recall we did a casting for Sean Payton last offseason?
Who did we come down on? Didn't my wife offer some options? She
did.
works
She
in the
did.
industry.
She and I combined because I'm I have some casting
You're a
talent
real
myself,
cinephile. So
yeah.
I'm going Peter Sarsgaard. Like, who is, he's never bad. He's never bad.
let's take a break. All right, let's keep moving. We got a bunch of news to hit before we get to Jordan, so we'll. But we got to give Tom Brady a little bit of time here because this is obviously a huge story. Tom Brady's season ended Sunday, 30-27 loss for the Bucs to the Rams. They wiped out a 24-point deficit, only to lose in heartbreaking fashion. Brady did play very well during the closing. In the closing half of that game, even though he was under constant duress. So he went out, if this would be the way he goes out, he went out as a big-time player still. But now we're hearing he's thinking about it. He's involving his family in making the decision. Here's what he said on his podcast with none other than the infamous Jim Gray.
Football is extremely important in my life, and it means a lot to me. And I care a lot about what we're trying to accomplish as a team, and I care a lot about my teammates. And the biggest difference now that I'm older is I have kids now too, and I care about them a lot as well. And they've been my biggest supporters. My wife is my biggest supporter. It pains her to see me get hit out there, and she deserves what she needs from me as a husband. My kids deserve what they need from me as a dad.
I've already kind of shared my thoughts on how I think this ends up, so I won't belabor it. But I do want to say, I knew that he has, Brady, a professional relationship with Jim Gray, the infamous Jim Gray. But it's apparently a podcast called the Let's Go podcast. And how boring must that podcast be to never be in the news? We never hear about it.
Like, maybe this is the first episode. I suppose.
You're telling me, okay, maybe it's been completely dark, but there is a scenario here where Tom Brady's been doing a podcast. Who knows? Every week, maybe three times a week, like around the NFL podcast.
Right.
And
Larry Fitzgerald is on it too.
Nothing newsworthy.
It's it's like 7. It's probably started.
Hey,
week
Ricky.
1. Timing-wise.
Can you do some digging and let me know how often the Let's Go podcast has published?
Yeah, let me look into it.
All right. Anyway, Connie, you got the floor.
All right. I didn't realize that I didn't have the floor at the beginning of the show when you asked me this. So here we go. I'm going to go into my actual take on this. I don't think that this is an attention thing for Tom Brady. When he says that he's going to kind of take time and think about it with his family, I believe him in that. And I think that he's serious here because he said that a farewell tour would not be something that he wanted to do and that he would find it distracting. But I think the main reason why I take this so seriously is because Tom Brady was on Howard Stern like 2 years ago, maybe. And it was a really interesting interview. And in that interview, he talked about his family and his relationship with them and his relationship with Giselle, and how they had gone to marriage counseling together, and how so much of what he does, it really is like a family decision. And when you think about the supreme effort that goes into Tom Brady being Tom Brady, that is not something that is easy. And that's taking away a lot of time from his family and from his personal life. I mean, he is like 70 years old maybe at this point. Like, he actually could be 80 years old at this point. But the way that he is playing and the way that he puts all of this work into his body and his performance and everything on the field, that's not insignificant. So I think that it could be him going out, and it's not a bad way to go out. Sure, that he didn't win another Super Bowl, but individually it was one of his best seasons. So we'll see. And especially after the way that they came back against the Rams, they fell short, but it was a dramatic comeback. So if he goes out, Ricky? Yeah, Rick.
Well, there were 43 episodes, and it's explicit. And it's through SiriusXM, but it does look like sometimes Tom Brady's not on it, and it's Larry Fitzgerald and Jim Gray. But it does look like Brady's been on quite a bit. Started
it's weekly.
In September.
I think
weekly.
My guess would be they take that radio hit and throw it into the podcast, but who knows? It's weekly, and there's Fitzgerald episodes. It's very strange.
You got the explicit tag.
It's a good point.
Hey, big.
We are better and bigger than Tom Brady at one thing, Dan. I mean,
that's true.
There's no way his podcast gets
Think
our
about
numbers.
It, like Aaron
Eat
Rodgers,
it, let's go.
Aaron Rodgers goes on
Gray.
the McAfee show, and it's like the biggest story in the NFL, like every Tuesday. Come on, Tommy.
Well, I mean, he's dropping incendiary commentary.
Right, he doesn't say anything, especially if it is that radio hit repurposed. It's like he really doesn't say anything on that. I think what he said on the podcast though was telling he's never talked like this before. That's why it's different. We've never had these reports before. He's never talked to Al Michaels about it before. I think he is going to retire. If I had to guess, obviously you have no idea.
Whoa.
But I just think because he just seems like the type football players say this all the time, that once you're thinking about it, it's like you're already retired. And I would think for Tom Brady, that would be doubly true. And just the way that he said, look, I get joy from playing football, but now outside of football, there's a lot of joy for me there as well. The team not, deserving anything less than his best. So like total commitment. Like I buy that. It almost sounds like he's leaning that way now, almost clearly. And it's that emotional time right after the season when a lot of players are like that, almost like he's trying to convince himself. Because, of course, he said it's not about necessarily what he wants. And it has been about what he wants, because he would have retired years ago if it wasn't about what he wants. And so that's why the timing of it all. And it sounded like he wanted to get back to another Super Bowl. That would have been the perfect way to go out. But he's played enough NFL seasons to know how brutal it is and how much of a chance there is next year that like the Bucs are way worse. Like he's realistic enough about that, or that he's worse, and that he's also been to the end of seasons where his team, stumbled to the finish line and people didn't even think about him as a top 10 quarterback. Like if he is going out, to me, this is about as on top as it could be, having this 2-year stint in Tampa Bay that even the most optimistic Tom Brady fans like me never would have thought would have been this successful on an individual level or a team level, that they got a Super Bowl. And so it just checks out to me that he is going to do it, or that he's leaning, at least at this moment, he's leaning that way, and he's just trying to give it a little time to see if he would change it. I don't think he's going to be a Brett Favre type at all.
So
I think he would be the opposite.
You're going to put your sandwich where your mouth is?
Sure. Why not? Why not?
I hate to be a dissenting voice. Like I agree with Gregg. I think he's out.
Right. And I admit, it's like, I don't know. We're reading into human character, but that would be my guess.
I get real concerned for the idea that someone like Tom Brady, who like his life, the sun is football, and that's what he revolves around. I get the family angle, and there has obviously been tension there because he mentioned that Giselle has wanted him to walk away for a while. So to me, what concerns me a little bit, beyond the football, aspect of it, is that it sounds like a compromise. Maybe not. What do I know? I don't know the family at all, but I worry about Tom Brady come August that suddenly, first of all, physically still in great shape, an MVP candidate, playing at the highest level, walking away from a game that has been his life, that is his identity on so many levels, for family life. I think that can be very fulfilling too. But I go back to like this interview that I had with Marv Levy's wife during Super Bowl week, and she talked about when he finally retired after decades and decades of the biorhythm of football, that he came into the home suddenly. He was there 24/7, and she had learned to live with Marv Levy living this other structured life. And she told me, said, look, this thing drove me absolutely nuts. Suddenly there's this guy in the house all day long who has nothing to do. And it was a terrible fit. I couldn't even put the article on NFL.com because it was far too negative. I'm not projecting that on Tom Brady, but I do worry about someone who is such a lifer this way, leaving for the family and kids reason.
It should be known because I have knowledge of this. Dolores Levy hated Marv Levy. The marriage was a sham.
Look I came away from the
Mark
interview.
burning
I know
another
you're
source.
kidding, but I came away from the interview thinking they were a match because they were never around each other. That's how they got to.
Do you want to do a sandwich with me on this too?
I totally think he's out. I will happily bet a sandwich
right.
on it.
He
How about
said
you,
in the
Connie?
past he wouldn't want to do a retirement tour too.
Right, exactly.
And he kind of did the Tom Brady series weekly. What was it called on ESPN this year? Like he just let go of his. He just released his clothing.
I think it's
line.
called
Doing all
Love You,
these
Tom.
commercials and stuff. It's like he's sort of branching out. You know?
Love you, bro.
He's out. I think he's retiring.
All right, you want to get it on the sandwich?
Yeah, I'm in.
Oh, I got 3 on the hook. Come on back, Tommy boy. All right, let's keep moving. Big story though, huge story. All right, let's hop on the personnel carousel, shall we? You like
the
that?
Bucks and the Saints
like
could both stink at the same time.
it. Yeah, the NFC South taking a hit potentially of epic proportions, and Matt Rule's like, yes, maybe now I'll go 6-11.
This is so
The
crazy.
Giants have filled their general manager post, hiring Joe Shane. Is it Shane? Is that what we came down on? The spelling's different, but
Yes.
Joe Shane. He is the new general manager of the G-Men. Shane is the former Bills assistant GM. He was the right-hand man up there in Buffalo. So this is a guy that helped build that powerhouse Bills roster, or certainly had a hand in it. So feels like so far so good for the Giants. The Bears also have filled their GM post, hiring, and this one, I don't know, for some reason this one bothers me. Ryan Poles is the new GM, which is too close to Ryan Pace, and also Nick Foles, who was a bad Bear. Ryan Poles.
It drives me nuts. It drives me absolutely nuts. If let's say you were someone, a girl or a guy, that's fine too, dating someone named Ryan. If you break up with Ryan, you don't go date another Ryan. You have to date someone with a different name before you go back to Ryan.
Imagine.
Why?
Go ahead.
Well, that's my personal code. Maybe you branched into that.
You love
area.
Ryan. Colleen famously loves Ryan.
No, I was gonna say my ex-boyfriend ended up marrying a Colleen. Do we think that that's problematic?
And his name was Gonzo.
Was it back to back? Was it back to
Yeah.
back, Colleen? Well, then you know what? More power to him. My theory is taking a dirt nap.
And in other news, the favorite to be the new general manager of the Minnesota Vikings, replacing Rick Spielman up there, is Browns up-and-comer vice president of football operations. Gonna nail it, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah.
By the way, the Sean Payton press conference is still going.
Can you imagine thinking what's going on in your life is that important?
What?
Like John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis didn't speak this long.
Well, no, he's getting questions. It is this important in New Orleans. Like, he should take all the public questions that they want to ask him.
This press conference started 73 minutes ago. He's a football coach.
Perfect fit. He's a perfect fit for Jerry Jones, by the way. Those two.
Let him have his moment.
He's the coach of the local football team.
I get it, but they're asking questions. He's not going to be in that setting ever again. So just let him keep asking.
And why do you hate Sean Payton?
The Bay of Pigs invasion failed. We have major problems. And then it's over in like 25 minutes.
Right, concise, Kennedy-esque. Right.
We should mention like that Giants.
Russia.
That Giants hire he's from the Bills. He's interviewing Brian Daboll as a finalist for that job. Dan Quinn is as well for a second interview, but it makes it more likely that it's going to be Daboll. And then with the Chiefs guy going to Minnesota, you kind of wonder if they'd bring in Eric Bieniemy. And supposedly he has a relationship with D'Amico Ryans, he was with in San Francisco, who was going to get a second interview in Minnesota. So those might be two names to watch.
I think Eric Bieniemy is going to need compromising photos of someone's owner to get a head coaching job. It just seems that's how this thing is going to play.
Well, this is a guy that worked with him closely, so you would think it would be telling one way or another if he doesn't hire him.
I found that the Shane hire interesting for the Giants on one little thing that there's whispers that Mara wants, the ownership wants Brian Flores, or is very into Brian Flores, but Shane worked under Chris Greer for 9 years. So if anyone's going to get the real story on Brian Flores and probably be, I would imagine, tilted away from Brian Flores, it would be the guy they just hired at GM.
I mean, if you're getting the guy that's the guy behind the guy in Buffalo personnel-wise, and Brian Daboll's a red-hot offensive coordinator candidate who's going to get a big chair, it seems to make sense.
Connect those dots. Yeah.
Real quick on the Poles hire, what did you guys think of George McCaskey picking up Poles at the airport wearing a Bears jacket and jeans and holding Poles' hometown as the card for him to recognize him? Apparently Bears Twitter was split on this. Half of them thought it was a cheap kind of way to do things. I thought it was kind of nice. I thought it was a sweet touch.
McCaskey, the chairperson of the Chicago Bears, official title.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I think they are just generally very a lot of Bears fans seem to be generally embarrassed by McCaskey as a human, so I'm not sure that it bridged the gap, but it seemed like a tender way to intro him. Yeah.
Tender.
Mark, have you put in a phone call to Adolfo Mensa to perhaps sway him to stay with Cleveland and keep that brain trust
or
intact?
To get that job? Go work for him in Minnesota.
Stop trying to kick Mark off the podcast, Greg. We see what you're trying to do.
No, I've not contacted him, but also, the Browns, this is the way this new thing works. They get 2 third-round picks if he takes the job. So we'll see. Although he probably would have been the guy making those picks. So now we've got issues. There's problems.
All right. Let's hop back on the personnel carousel here. A number of coaches now are taking second interviews. Gregg's going to run them down because that's how his brain works. He has them all on the tip of his tongue right now. The only one I'll share with you is that our good friend, Packers offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, is set to have his second interview with the Broncos. That went down yesterday, actually, in Denver. We are close, and I got this update from David Ely on the news desk, and we know the news desk apocalypse surrounding the headshot and a unnamed talent flagging them multiple times. Head coach Nathaniel Hackett in play.
Sounds like they like
sense.
him. They had Dan Quinn for a second one too, but Hackett seems to be getting a little more buzz.
If Rodgers ends up coming back and going over there, then that would kind of
seems like a bad
as a connection.
I would hope that wouldn't be the reason that you were hiring him, because that it might not be up to Aaron Rodgers.
Well, they also interviewed his QB coach. They interviewed the Packers QB coach for that head coaching job too. So you wonder if Hackett brings him over as OC, and suddenly Aaron Rodgers, who has backed Nathaniel Hackett as a head coaching hire for a while now, it maybe gets into the head a little bit and thinking it's nice in Denver.
It does feel like a modern day Broncos move to really roll out the red carpet without any promises. I would say whether you're Hackett, who's all right, he's a pretty good candidate in terms of hot names. He's connected to a team that's done very well in the regular season. Dan Quinn's an even better example, who's coming off a year where he's completely rehabbed his image. Wouldn't you not go anywhere, knowing what we know about our league, unless a star quarterback was there? It's just too much of a risk to join a team that doesn't have a guy in place, because you only get 1 to maybe 3 years, but probably 1 to 2 years. Are you really going to roll the dice if you have your pick of teams? If I'm Quinn, I would not leave that position unless they absolutely had a rock star landing spot.
Yeah, the second time around,
that place,
right? I think the
Denver
second time
and their
around,
track record.
That's right, because he's earned the life-changing money. Nathaniel Hackett, who knows if he ever gets another offer? It's tough to be choosy. Some of these guys who get in the interview cycles are gone from it forever pretty soon. I mean, he can look to his dad as an interesting example. I mean, Paul Hackett was supposed to be the next Bill Walsh, his dad. Never quite happened, and Bill Walsh, I believe, was furious at him for leaving the nest in San Francisco back in the day. And it's weird. Nathaniel Hackett isn't calling plays in Green Bay. When he was calling plays, it was for the Blake Bortles Jaguars. Not wasn't beloved by any means. No.
Interesting. All right, let's. Any other coaches you guys want to throw out there? All right, good. Let's move on. In other news, I found this interesting. Andy Reid, he's been on both sides of the overtime coin toss, good and bad, where you're trying to, extend your season, get to a Super Bowl, you lose the coin toss in a classic game, your great quarterback never gets the ball. Andy Reid empathizes with the Bills after that difficult divisional playoff loss for Buffalo. I wouldn't be opposed to an OT rules change, Reid said. Ian Rappaport, our own Ian Rappaport, the NFL Network insider, said that it is potentially on the table, that a change could happen. We shall see. Now, I've been thinking about this. Gregg, we talked about it on the Sunday night show, how you pointed out correctly that if it was both teams get the ball, regardless of what happens in the first possession, it actually favors the second team because they know what they need. The team that gets the ball second, I should say. All right, so what if you kept a coin flip? Whoever wins the coin flip gets to elect whether they get the ball first or second. You'll almost always, I would think, take second strategically. And that way, the flip still gets to decide who has the advantage, but it doesn't potentially end the game without both quarterbacks / offenses seeing the field. How about that?
I don't think it's better. I don't think.
I tried.
don't think,
I'm out.
No, I mean, I don't think there's a better overtime situation. I think overtime inherently is gonna be random, so you have to win in regulation to avoid that. But any recipe where it's like you could be playing 3 overtimes essentially because the possessions keep going back and forth like college, seems crazy for a league that sounds obsessed about player safety. It's like football. If you get to the end and the defense is gassed and like they can't stop them anymore, that sounds like a time for the game to end. You know what I mean? Like I just don't see why that.
But I guess this is my point about this whole thing. And Mark, I'm curious what you think. Like if you're gonna, and I'm not saying this to you specifically, Gregg, but everyone that's bitching about the overtime rules, well, we need to have everyone that has to have a plan. Now, I just shared mine. Gregg shot it down. That's fine with it.
I mean,
I'm
it's fine.
out.
It's similar.
Now I'll be there.
Similar.
Somebody, we need ideas. We need to figure this out because it does feel like the current plan just doesn't work.
I would just say with the player safety thing, like I wouldn't change regular season at all. I don't think anyone's pushing to do that. But when you get into a playoff scenario like we've seen, it robbed, obviously, Patrick Mahomes of a chance to match Tom Brady a couple years ago. This time Mahomes is on the upper hand of that, but it robbed us of seeing Josh Allen, and I think it kind of stole the spirit of that game away. So I'm hearing lots of good ideas. I'm not going to cook one up because who's going to listen to that?
Hold on.
But I would say you do it. Colleen, what do you think?
I think that they should play the full overtime period until the very end, and then if they're still tied there, each team gets one offensive possession.
What if they both score touchdowns?
A lot of football. It's so much
But
NFL
I think players
football.
would not care to have to play that.
These things are car
crashes. All right, how about this?
Every play is a car crash.
I'm factoring
I kind of like the 10 minutes, though. I kind of like that.
I'm factoring in everything that everyone is saying, including the player safety, which is something that the NFL, even though sometimes it doesn't align with how the realities of how the league's moving forward, they talk a lot about player safety. Keep the current modified overtime rules in place, regular season, like Mark's saying, that's fine. Mm-hmm. It's a regular season. In the playoffs, you have a newly modified overtime situation that is shifted to make sure these teams get a fair shake because the championship is now on the line. It's second season. How about that? Modified postseason overtime.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that seems to serve everyone. And Gregg, I mean, we're talking about like the exhaustion factor and how can we possibly have them play 5 more minutes. This may occur like this would occur maybe like 1 or 2 times in the playoffs tops. I mean, it just seems like that game, the rule changes come off of premier island game moments like that. That's what triggers the NFL to make change.
Right. That's why Andy Reid had to say that. He was boxed in a corner because he was literally the one who brought up the rules proposal change 4 years ago, and it didn't go anywhere. Like the Chiefs were the ones who wanted the rules change. And maybe the league maybe the people who are making the decisions has changed, but it didn't work 4 years ago.
It's taken on it is a very tedious argument on Twitter at this point. But I think that from the spirit of what we watched, Bills Chiefs, I would like to see it change a little bit.
I guess part of me thinks like, hey, newsflash, it's all randomness is such a huge factor. We add on all these narratives after the fact, but it's like it's a random thing, and that like can be uncomfortable as fans. That the coin flip does matter. I think it's only been like 53% of teams in general have that won the coin flip have won. So it hasn't been like that huge of a factor.
In the playoffs, I think they've won 10 out of 11 times.
In the playoffs, it's happened more. I don't know if that's right. But it's like everything was random to get to that point, and that's I think what happens with an overtime.
But Greg, that's
overtime is inherently
then
random.
At that point, we don't adjust anything in human existence.
No, my point.
The random nature of all things is. I mean, what?
No, I'm saying to get to overtime, and there's so many factors that had to come into play before that. Like I can accept a little bit of randomness with the coin flip because it's not that big. Ultimately, you can still go win a ball game a million other ways.
You pointed out Andy Reid 4 years ago. That was after that classic between the Patriots and Chiefs, I assume, in the AFC title game when the Chiefs lost the coin toss at Arrowhead and never got the ball. I love Tom Brady. What about the idea that same thing with how the pass interference rule came to be, a high visibility playoffs instance being a catalyst for change? I wonder because that's being seen by many people as well. That didn't work out well. I'm just saying. I feel like you're in the minority on this, Greg. I think a lot of people would like to experiment with change, and maybe it doesn't work. Like even the pass interference thing, yes, it failed miserably, but I don't mind that the NFL was open to trying different things to make the product better.
I'm with you. I just haven't heard the thing that like gets me excited about something different. I was all for when they changed the overtime, and that was a 3-year process. If you guys remember, that was in the playoffs only for a couple years, right? That was back in 2010, 2012 or so, and they eventually adopted it, and it's been better. But I haven't heard one that I like.
I don't remember anything from 2010.
It's just so.
I wrote a lot of PFT posts about it. It was a lot of excitement.
Sean McDermott, Bills coach, speaking of that classic game, he said he has watched the last 13 sets. This is why Sean Payton retired today, quote unquote retired. He's watched the last 13 seconds of regulation that led to that heartbreaking loss for Buffalo 1 million times. Let's listen to McDermott. And this is good that we have sound because that means that Sean McDermott is still alive.
I watched it on video, and I've watched it over and over in my head 1 million times, and in my stomach 1 million more. I'll continue to watch it in my mind and in my gut for years.
I wrote about it in the power rankings this week. Time will tell. Is this the final agonizing roadblock for the Bills in their climb to Lombardi glory, or will this be the loss that sticks to the ribs like no other loss since those Super Bowl defeats? Like, we don't know. The only thing we do know is now the Bills need to go through another entire offseason, another training camp, another regular season, into the playoffs just to get back to this point again. It's not just physical now for the Bills and where that organization is at, it's mental as well.
There's just so many heartbreaks too. I mean, when you think about the history of the Bills, and you have the Music City Miracle, and you have the wide right, and you have now like the 13 seconds, and the fact that Sean McDermott and all of the players are going to replay this over and over and over in their minds. It's so heavy on them. And I really hope, though, it is the beginning for this team and not the end, because it really could go either way. And we've seen it work with Kansas City and the Chiefs when they sort of came out on the wrong end of things, and now they're trying to get back to their third straight Super Bowl. But there are so many things that need to break right for teams, and injuries. I mean, you're talking about player personnel, schedule, all of it. And the one thing that stood out to me when I was looking through McDermott's quotes, just him talking about that plane ride home. And obviously all of us can imagine what it was like, but he said if you saw that plane ride on the way home, you would not come away with the impression that we're fine. And that's stating the obvious, but just putting yourself in their shoes, flying back from that just utter devastation.
Oh my God.
Right. And it's sort of what I was getting at with like the randomness of it all. Like, I guess I just don't buy that the Bills didn't have some inherent championship level qualities inside of them that prevented them from winning the title this year. To me, they with a couple little things happening different that didn't have to do with them, or let's say they score in the next play, like then they win the Super Bowl. They were a championship team, but they didn't win it, and that's what happens in sports sometimes. And they'll have other cracks at it. Josh Allen is too good for them not to be a factor of it all. But you don't know. You just don't know that you're going to be there in that same sort of
they'll be relevant
spot.
For
right,
years.
They'll be relevant, but maybe they won't be that good. You just don't know.
And to Connie's point, I mean, Sean Payton, probably still speaking as we speak, can tell you. Yeah, is he still there? I don't know. He can tell you those
just wrapped
three.
up. Andrew is taking it from him and saying
90 minutes for the local football coach.
Andrew's doing what?
Wow.
He's just wrapping a bow on it, getting him into the next show.
A real Abe Lincoln of sorts. But I mean, those three straight, heart-wrenching playoff losses the Saints had, you thought, well, can they get back there because they're that good? Suddenly there's no Sean Payton. Suddenly there's no Drew Brees. Suddenly there's total chaos.
Right. That and all that said, like, it's got to kill Sean McDermott watching that film too, because he's.
Well, I don't think he's watching it for giggles.
He's got to get his binoculars out to find his safeties on those two plays. I fired it up. They're 40 yards down the field. What are they doing there? What are they doing there? They weren't in the plays. They like the safety came up to tap Kelsey. He did about as good as he could have. He was like standing at the goal line. Something strange broke down there, and he said it was execution, McDermott. He wouldn't go into that even beyond the kickoff thing, but something strange happened with the execution of the defense for those last two plays.
And he was hired to be a defensive mastermind too.
That's tough to stomach as a defensive coach.
I was on Good Morning Football this morning, and Gabriel Davis, he of the 4 touchdowns in a losing effort, was on being interviewed right before, and the man looked like he was at his own funeral. Like, it was a very, it's a very bittersweet, strange position for somebody like Gabriel Davis, who just had the greatest professional day he'll ever have in his life, most likely. And if things just went a little bit different in those hashtag 13 seconds, he's one of the biggest stories in the NFL. Instead, it's just kind of an afterthought. And by the way, on that note, 13 seconds. Not the 13-second miracle, not the 13-second game. These all-time classics need that shorthand description. 13 seconds.
Bingo.
That's it.
You nailed it.
By the way, that press conference going 90 minutes, little American history for you guys. William Henry Harrison was the president for just 31 days. He passed away in 1841 after he gave the longest inauguration speech of any U.S. president. Outdoors in Washington, he fell seriously ill, potentially because of his exposure to the elements, and he died 1 month later. So it's just like, it's important to, and that was the guy that just got elected president, and I'm sure his speech was shorter than Sean Payton's just now.
It's timely.
Although I think Payton's was indoors. It looks pretty warm down there in New Orleans. I think he'll be.
He's
I
in
think
good
his
health.
he looks really in good shape too.
Shout out William Henry Harrison. Wherever you at, big man.
Your son's namesake, is that the story that inspired you to name your son Harrison?
Well, the craziest thing is I wanted his name to be Henry, and my wife said no. So
is it because you're friends with an adult Henry, Handsome
mostly
Hank?
Yes, it was because
that's what stopped.
So it would be the second, or
what about
Henry
VP? Yes, John Tyler in a big spot. I get tapped to be the vice, and that's cool. I'm Veep. A month later, I'm Pusa. Not bad. All right. In other news, I'm just saying, I'm sure it was a bummer that his colleague and the president of the United States.
I think we all just were stuck on the word you said before that, but we figured it out.
What, Pusa?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. Hey, good news. Fire up, turn up your amps, tune up your guitars, because the Carolina Panthers landed their rock star offensive coordinator, Ben McAdoo, baby. Let's hear another tasty lick, Ricky. McAdoo, rock god. So that's good. That's good for the Panthers. And finally, late night with Jim Irsay, the Colts owner, at 1:20 a.m. Eastern time this morning, tweeted the following to the masses. You can see, clear as day, in the final 8 NFL team playoffs, you need a QB and offense, comma, who can score 30 or more in regulation, ellipses, and a defense that can hold an opponent under 30, slammer, football. The last 4 games, I wrote this down somewhere. Here we are. The last 4 games for the Indianapolis Colts, point total 27, 22, 23, 11. So it is what it is. It's all out there, isn't it?
Wait, can I just tell you something that happened during that? That was a wonderful summary, but like in the background, and Colleen, if you're watching this on YouTube, a door opens and an adult male walks through the door with like a barking dog. I'm assuming that was Gonzo, right? But that was just
that was
don't blow up
John.
Connie's spot. We don't know if that's Gonzo.
Right,
that's my lover back there. He just like walked over to the corner of the kitchen and started pointing to his wrist like time, and then throwing his hands up because I've been in the kitchen now for a while doing this pod. I think he's hungry. I don't know. He's yelling still.
Wait, who does Gonzo think he is? He just because he's hungry, we should wrap up the show, or you should jump off?
Exactly. Yeah. See what?
Well, he didn't make you. He was.
And by the way, I had that great setup about Irsay and the future of the Colts. It gets blown away because John can't stay in his bedroom for another 10 minutes.
I thought the Irsay thing was fun. I didn't know anything about all that, so I thought it was informative. And bye-bye Carson Wentz.
I love John Gonzalez. He hijacked the show there.
He did.
He's hungry. He wants a sandwich.
That's his nature.
Yeah. He's a star.
Yeah, it is going to be an interesting QB carousel because it's becoming increasingly apparent that Jim Irsay is all done with Carson Wentz. All right, that's what's happening in the news. Let's take a break, and then let's get to Jourdan Rodrigue. All right, welcome back. It is time to welcome a guest. We're all excited to speak with this woman. She covers the Rams for The Athletic. She's also the co-host of the 11 Personnel pod. She is the great Jourdan Rodrigue. What's up, Jourdan? Welcome to the Around the NFL podcast. How are you?
Hey, guys. I seem collected on the surface, but I'm internally freaking out. Big fan of the show. I told Erica I was going to say that probably 60 times, so just start cutting me off or editing it out or something when I start. Big fan of the show, by the way. Don't know if I mentioned that. But.
Which of us is your favorite?
Yeah,
I plead the fifth on that one. You can that's the one.
See,
we about. Yeah.
that's the thing with Schrager, Jourdan. I don't know if you saw the episode a couple of years ago or listened to the episode. We asked Peter Schrager the same question, and then he said Gregg, and we were all like, "What?"
No.
Yeah. Well, no.
Why did I remember this happening?
I asked Peter Schrager which one of us he respected the most, and he did not hesitate and said Gregg. While Dan and I were sitting there, somewhat thunderstruck by the response.
It's refreshing. You give some small talk answer. You expect, no one's the favorite, but he just gave you the truth, and that's nice.
Refreshing for Gregg.
Jourdan, you might be and I think maybe the whole group will contend this as well, favorite beat reporter at The Athletic, which is quite a title because there's so much great talent there. But you're such a great writer. You cover the sport and that team so well. And why don't we start this way with the Rams? Because I thought the way you put it in your write-up after that classic near meltdown turned amazing victory in Tampa, that there are some demons with this team, right? Whether it's Stafford struggles in the past, even Matt Gay, the kicker, going to Tampa, and Sean McVay now has to slay another. There's a demon here, obviously, with the San Francisco 49ers and the other boy genius on the other sideline. Do you think the Rams have that mental capability to step on the throat of an opponent, get to the Super Bowl, and completely rewrite their narrative of a lot of people connected to this organization?
You know what has been so insane, chaotic, covering this team. I think in a good way, because I think, especially when you're a beat writer, which I love being, and thank you for saying that. Although I think you have to say that because I am the guest on your show today. You get to see incremental.
Nope, we do rankings actually pretty regularly.
Yeah, very accurate.
Zach Kiefer is like furious at us right now, but you have turned out to be on top.
Sorry, Zach. Zach Kiefer is the ultimate talent there, but I'm feeling pretty proud of this. So it's you get to see incremental change over time, and you get to sort of study that, right? And that's what I love about covering this team, is because they've had major catalytic changes, but then also all the little things that are happening between those spaces. And that's where I think they do allow some of these, what I call them, they allowed some of these demons to sort of peek through and sneak through it and almost catch them by surprise at times. 4 fumbles will certainly catch you by surprise in the middle of a game. But I think with this team, I worry less. The interesting thing, a personality with them that's developed, is I almost worry less about how things go for them when things are calm, when they have a lead, when they can exhale. And I worry more about, what they do in those moments. I worry less about what happens when their back's up against the wall. All through December, you saw them winning games when all of these external factors were affecting their team, massive COVID-19 outbreak and, losing Robert Woods earlier in November, onboarding 2 new players, just all of the things, the moving parts that are swirling around this team. And then them navigating through that as well as they did, winning, 5 in a row. And then ultimately, finally, a 17-point lead against, again, the 49ers, who they could have knocked out of postseason contention, and exhaling for the first time, going into the halftime, going into the locker room at halftime. And then they come back out and everything hits the fan. So it's been so interesting kind of gauging the personality. It's almost like they work better when there's chaos happening all around them. And I don't know who that's reflective of. Matthew Stafford certainly is comfortable operating through that chaos. We nickname him on my podcast Darkly Chaotic Matthew Stafford, because he does seem to navigate that headspace rather well. But it's been interesting. This team, it's almost like they can never let themselves get comfortable in any way, because things start slipping through the cracks in that regard.
I love that you nicknamed him Darkly Chaotic, because that's exactly what I bookmarked in your article from this week when you described his tendency to dip too far into darkly chaotic decision making, and also the fact that he embraced that chaos and kind of found clarity at the end of that game. But can you explain just like a little bit more about the dark place that his teammates kind of described him going into after that spike? Yeah,
it was kind of, they saw him maybe leave this plane and enter another one. I think, it was very interesting. That's part of the reason why I love this team, right? Because I love covering this team, because they are so fascinating in the little things that they let slip. And that was a personality slip in him that we hadn't really seen. You see the competitor, you see the guy who wants the ball in his hands at the end of the game, regardless of whether or not they have a lead. He wants to stay on the field. He wants to be participating. And certainly when things aren't going their way, he wants to be the guy that helps sort of settle the calm, even if he is part of the reason why that chaos has happened in the first place. And that was a sort of explosive moment when he spiked that ball, because his teammates sort of saw this different look in his eyes, as Sean McVay always says, talks about people's look in their eyes, right? And so they sort of saw this different person who really does elevate in those moments. And that's why I always find him a fascinating study, because he does invite that sometimes. He does turn the ball, or he did earlier in the season, postseason, he's been excellent. But he was turning the ball over at inopportune times in certain moments. But you never felt like there was this implosion. And then sort of he channeled that in the end of the game, all of that sort of chaos that he's adept at navigating, sometimes even if it's self-inflicted. And it almost seemed to just burst out of him in that spike. And his teammates are like, whoa, man. So it was really fascinating. And I do think, and then him talking post-game, is sometimes you have to go into that place and learn how to embrace that place, which I think we've seen over the course of his career. Certainly, to me, that's a psychological component of this, is learning how to be that person and embrace that part of you, even when things go wrong, even when it's your fault if things go wrong.
That makes me so much more interested in Matthew Stafford, that he has sort of a dark inner region that he channels during games. I'll start there,
Mark's
but
love language.
Mordor Stafford, yeah.
Darkness
it's very
and chaos.
Intriguing, very intriguing. But I mean, it's obviously such a weather-worn fact at this point that the Niners have stomped them, taken them 6 in a row. But in terms of the team's psychology, the potential weight of that, we're weeks removed from them melting down against the Niners, which obviously changed the complexion of the NFC playoffs drastically. Is there a weight? Is this a new opportunity where they're able to take all that and put it on a boat and just float it out into the ocean? Or is it something that they think about, that Sean McVay thinks about, dealing with Kyle Shanahan, who's just owned them? It's such an outlier for the Rams. Like, where are they neck up?
I think they wanted it. You hear guys talk about wanting it this way, and you lose to a team six times. I think that says something about you as a group, as a person, for wanting this to be the case. And I think it's because this would be the ultimate way to sort of to shake these guys in the end, to really sort of prove that they belong, to really set those roots back into the ground after getting here and having such early success early on after their move back to Los Angeles, and to really build around that. That's substance. The Rams have a lot of style, and they get style points left, right, and sideways all through the year for the moves they make and for the things that they can do, and then the passing concepts they have and some of the star defensive players. But beating a team that you have, for lack of all other irony and storylines that were possible, this is the most ironic storyline that they could have faced. And this is also the one that I think, if they get past this, provides them with the most substance, shows the most resilience and the most substance that they have so worked toward proving, sort of despite a lot of external conversation about, what they're not. And I think this does show what they're not. They had a chance to close. They had a chance to eliminate these guys, and they didn't. They allowed them to sort of creep back in, just like they did in the game. And so, they want this chance to prove that this is who they really are. Not the guys who let other people hang around, but the guys who can control their own fate. And I think part of the thing that helps too, I would think it's a mental technique as well, knowing that you can get out to a lead in front of a team that has 6 times in a row just handled you, knowing that you can get out to that lead, and then figuring out that new part of yourself where you do close.
Well, that's the thing about the Rams. Like, in that first half, when they got up 17-0, they looked like the best team in the NFL. They should have been up against the Bucs, the defending champs, 34-3 at one point. That looked like Jaguars Patriots for a while. It was just total domination. And what the 49ers have done so well over the years, I think, is overwhelm them with physicality. They stopped the Rams running game last time around. And once you got into the second half, they started winning the pass rush battle, and they started pushing the Rams around running the ball. So to me, I would imagine that feels great. Like, that's the ultimate challenge. I'm just wondering, like, as someone that's watched this team and seen Sean McVay coach up front, do you think some of this giving up the lead and the lack of killer instinct Dan talks about goes up to him? Because the thing that I'm always surprised about is how conservative he is by nature. Not, fourth down decisions, maybe running the ball more when you have the lead, even though the pass is working. Like, in a game like Tampa, and then maybe just spinning forward to this one, when the running game's not working, like, do you trust Sean McVay to approach this like, we're just gonna throw it on them? Like, we are not going to be content just trying to get to the finish line here. Let's blow this team out. Let's be aggressive, because he hasn't always been that coach.
Yeah, I think one of the blocks that he faces and has so often against this team is, what do you do when all of the normal things don't work? Do you keep trying those things, or do you try to push through even if it makes you uncomfortable or takes you to a part of yourself that you aren't usually showing in terms of that lack of conservatism that he normally does show and display so often? And that surprised me too, coming to cover this team, because you don't look at this team on paper and think, oh yeah, they almost quite literally never go for it on fourth down or any of those things. And so I think that to me, in order to, if you're faced with a similar situation, and let's face it, the planets are aligning for all of this to be extremely similar to what we've seen in over the last couple of times, because it seems like the story is written this way. And to me, that's, you have to take the different path at that time. You have to keep being aggressive, because he was plenty aggressive in the first half of that game. And just like what you're saying, Gregg, he sort of, you sort of turtle up a little bit, and you sort of, play to not lose. But I don't think you can do that anymore. I think you have to force yourself out of that box. You have to force yourself out of that comfort zone of what the safest decisions are, and trust that this is a team that, again, does operate really well in that crazy space. And I think that that's a really important factor. He's trying to, or should be trying to, unlearn and then relearn at this point of the process, because the rest of it hasn't worked. It really hasn't. And especially when a team like the 49ers is such a bad matchup for the Rams, in part because they can flood those margins. They can sort of turn on their heads the spaces in which someone is playing it too safe. And I think that's been one of the biggest difference makers in these two teams, and the way that their ethos is sort of composed for that reason. And I think Sean McVay needs to almost like punch his way through that.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see if the Rams, if the game script plays out similarly and Los Angeles has a lead. Do you let your veteran quarterback, the one that you met by happenstance in Cabo, do you let him take you to the Super Bowl? I kind of feel like that would be the way to play it. But listen, Sean McVay knows what he's doing. We'll see how he plays it if that presents itself. Jourdan, you did it. You've said it all. We feel more prepared to watch the Rams on Sunday thanks to you. And everybody, make sure. We mean it. You want to read some really great sports writing right now?
For real.
Read everything from Jourdan over at The Athletic. Thank you so much, and good luck this weekend.
Thanks, guys. I think my hands are shaking right now.
I feel like we could have used more compliments, though. You said you were going to keep complimenting. And...
Yeah.
Well, you guys, this is the thing. You guys reverse Sean McVay me. You flipped it on me. Now you and now I'm all thrown off. Oh my God.
Don't get conservative in your game write-up now on Sunday night. You got to go for it. Stick the landing. All right. Good stuff. Thank you, Jourdan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jourdan.
Thanks, Jourdan.
All right, there she goes. Excellent.
I love her.
Yeah, she's great. And isn't it interesting that the Rams, and Mark, I know you've had a complicated relationship at times with the Rams as a team that maybe gets too much love, but they really are a very interesting team at this moment in time. I don't mind talking about them for extended periods.
Well, I think right now, I don't have a problem with them being, the belle of the ball, because they've earned it now. It's when they kind of
Mark's cool covering them once they make it to the championship game. That they deserve some coverage.
I already, 2 months ago, gave up all willpower to desire anything to happen this season. I'm kind of enjoying it because things are getting spicy. I would listen to her podcast, too, which I checked out today with Rich Hammond. Very good Rams coverage there, too. Excellent journalist. Good guest. And I do think that if you had to power rank who she respects most, I think it's probably going to be easy for me to detect. I'll tell you later what my findings are. Where am I going? Why
quick,
am I still talking?
Mark,
what is going on
would you
with
say that you respect and love the Rams more now after hearing that Stafford goes to these dark places?
Oh, entirely. I mean, it adds a layer of complex intrigue that I didn't really understand about Matthew Stafford before. I mean, I think you're in a dark place if you're in Detroit for a decade plus to begin with, but this is entirely from a different angle.
I love that. So I think it was made clear, but just to kind of hit it again, after Stafford hit that big completion to set up the Matt Gay field goal.
For the love of the game route.
For the love of, yes, as it will forever be known. After he spikes the ball, he's in another world. He's in a dark place, and you would think he'd be ecstatic. He not only did he take the hit, make the throw, get down the field, spike the ball, and give the team a chance, he was in some other place. I love that. It's just the competitor within, and this is kind of like his moment after a dozen years in Detroit, never really getting the shot. I think he's seizing that, and that's something to remember when we decide who's going to win this game on Sunday, that Stafford might have that eye of the tiger, for a lack of a better description.
And he took the hit from Ndamukong Suh, his old teammate.
And they were barking at each other.
Hits it against the zero blitz that Jared Goff was the guy who could never solve. You had to get rid of Jared Goff, and he does that. It all maybe he was just tired from running down the field, but I like that he sort of blacked out in that moment.
All right, now it's time. We can all black out if we want because the show's over.
Nice.
So just feel free to do that, but do it safely if that's possible. Connie, thank you for joining us. You're always a bright, shining light in our orbit, so thank you.
Great to be back. Great to see you guys. This was fun.
And check
We're
out
just throwing
Connie.
compliments around all over the place, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing to tell people that you respect, that you like being around them, and you're enjoying professionally working with them. That's okay, Mark.
I know, but I've not heard anyone say that directed towards me. So
I like working with you, Mark. I respect you
Love it,
professionally.
Mark.
It's been a
All
long
Mark's
and
fine.
fruitful
All right,
relationship.
all right, enough.
We're coming
Good
up
show.
on our 10 years together here as coworkers. Meet
It's
the
been
three
largely
of us.
productive
10
as a
totally
professional
pure,
bond.
totally pure years. Totally pure.
Anyway, check out Connie also on the Split Ends podcast with Ricky Hollywood. We'll be back on Thursday with a proper preview. Listen, there's only 3 games left now. We got 2 on Sunday, and then the big boy. Well, Mark's all in on the Pro Bowl.
Don't forget
also.
the Pro Bowl.
Yeah,
the Pro
so we got the
Bowl's-
Pro Bowl as well.
Absolutely.
But yes, so if you count the Pro Bowl, 4. But we recognize 3 on this show. Don't tell Rog. Don't tell any shadowy league figures. Let's just leave it at that. Thank you for listening. And remember, heed the call.